Richard Godfrey, how the devil are you?
I'm good, thanks, mate. How are you?
Excellent. Yeah, I'm not too bad. Not too bad at all. Do you want to quickly just introduce yourself and what it is that you do?
Yeah, I've just realised I look like I'm on a prison wall here. I should have had a height measure. It
That
would
would
only
have
go
been
up to
good.
5'10", but would be all right. Yeah, so Richard Godfrey, I'm managing director of my company, Syncity. Set up about 2.5 years ago now, having worked in local government for 10 years before that at Peterborough, IT director. Uh, Joined a software house, worked with them for 3 years, implementing Salesforce solutions, learned a lot about the cloud technology, everything like that, and then thought, let's go give it a go, see how we get on going alone. And don't do it about 6 months before COVID because it's really tough.
I can
Wait till
imagine.
COVID's finished and then set a business up.
I can imagine, but you're still managing to feed and clothe your children, though. So that's
Yeah, pretty much. Hand me downs from me now. They all
absolutely.
have to wear
And
branded clothing
I was
constantly.
going to say, and you're still managing to get in a line of on-brand,
Absolutely.
sportswear. So that's the main thing. Oh, superb. So one of the things that I know that you're, really interested in is sort of the strategic thinking around digital in local councils and stuff like that. Where do you stand on this idea? Because I know some people say, well, you don't even need a digital strategy. Why do people do this? I know I've my opinions on this, but I was interested in what yours are. When might a council need a digital strategy?
Yeah, so my opinion is probably the exact opposite in that I think it's a fundamental document that you
Right.
do
Yeah.
need, uh, but not necessarily the ones that we see from the local councils at the moment.
Mm.
I'm quite critical in a lot of LinkedIn posts and stuff about how bad they are. And for me, it's because they're kind of just a generic buzzword bingo document that
Mm.
doesn't mean anything. And I think when you look at it like that, having a strategy is pointless because there's no kind of flow through the work you're doing into a strategy, into a corporate plan. So for me, I kind of come at it completely different and think about, okay, the digital strategy is all about what we're doing within IT or digital to make the rest of the council better at what they do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a firm believer IT is a service to the council to make everyone else better. Therefore, your strategy has to be based on what are housing doing, what are waste doing, what are social care doing, or what do they want to achieve in the next 5 years? And therefore, what can we do in digital to help them on that journey or to accelerate that journey and get them there? And therefore, you have, or you should have, quite a nice flow from kind of like a big corporate plan into departmental plans, into something that says, okay, this is where you all want to get to, this is where we are, how do we kind of fill the gap? And
Mm-hmm.
then when you've got that strategy, so instead of having a chapter that says digital by default, you have a chapter that says housing services, housing want to achieve this, this is where they are today, and this is basically the gap, and this is what we think we can do to get them there.
Mm.
And if you look at it in that way, then writing a business case afterwards to deliver some of that becomes easy because you're saying we're investing in this because they want to achieve that, because the plan says this, the corporate plan says that. That makes life much simpler. If you've got one that just says we're going to do cloud, then when you go to that department, it's a bit, well, who cares? No one
Yeah.
outside
Yeah.
of IT cares it's cloud. And the other reason you put the kind of the housing side in is because it then forces you to go and talk to housing.
Mm.
So we're great in IT talking about user needs and user stories and having workshops when we're actually getting to the software bit or the development bit. But I'm 6 months ahead of that going, you're writing a strategy, you should be sat talking to them at that point. And in a similar way, you shouldn't really be able to publish a strategy because it should have elements in it that say, this is what's blocking us from achieving something or why we can't get there. So Dorset, I'm a little bit of a fan of because they've done one, but they've called it a vision. And
Right.
it's
Yeah.
not a strategy. And you're like, okay, I'm fine with that. Your vision is that you want to achieve all this stuff. You then might have an actual strategy that sits behind it that just has a bit more detail and basically says, this is why we're doing it. And
Mm.
I think then let's face it, no one reads the IT strategy or the digital strategy outside of IT anyway. But actually, if you say to them, this is what's in it for you, being quite selfish, this is what you're getting, this is why we think we can make you better, then it helps them kind of adopt that, take it on and work closely together.
Yeah, no, I mean that's really interesting. So it's actually because I think sometimes when people thinking about writing strategy, the idea is it needs to be really high level. It needs to sort of apply corporate wide and all that kind of stuff. And kind of what you're suggesting actually is that that's quite an unhelpful thing to do, because to get something that's applicable to the entire organisation is more often than not going to be pretty vague and thus a little bit meaningless.
Yeah, I mean, you might have. I mean, I use a template that basically says go into each department and ask them a list of questions, basically. And forget one of those departments is going to be IT. So you're going to have to ask yourself, what do we need to make IT better ourselves? Yeah. But then you do have a corporate one that kind of might be your wider. We'll go to 365, or we'll allow people to work from home. We'll do laptops over desktops, or we'll give people tablets. You might have some corporate elements of it, but then underneath that you've got all the individual departmental ones, and it works quite nicely, and you don't necessarily have to fill loads and loads of detail in day one. You can kind of say, this is what we're thinking, this is where we'll get to, but we'll obviously come back to you, and that's when the workshops and everything take place. But what I do have in it, in the ones I write, a set of guiding principles. So to me, they're where you're kind of saying digital by default, cloud and the other bits, there for me are your guiding principles within the document, not the strategy itself. So I use an acronym, which is ICE, which is quite simple to remember: Integrated Cloud Ecosystem. And they're kind of the three things I start talking to about. So do we need to integrate with not just other systems, but do other departments need to integrate? Do they need to talk to each other? And at what level? You don't need full integration between two systems. It might be you just need an email to be pinged across, or an alert or something that's easy. Yeah. But it means you have to at least have the conversations. Cloud, obviously I'm advocate of cloud first for me, but obviously if there isn't a solution that works for you that's cloud, you go down the stack. And then ecosystem is again looking at tools that have pre-built tools that work with it. So I mentioned Salesforce, Salesforce, the app exchange, thousands and thousands of pre-built add-ons that you can use, or systems that work with. So it's a little bit just about looking wider than just the tool you want to buy. Yeah. And that's my starting point. And then you can add principles either side of that. But that then is just keeping, I read a book that described it as kind of the barriers at the side of the road. They don't stop you driving into them, but they'll try and keep you on that path as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's a really, really interesting way of sort of structuring it. So a lot of councils, when they're thinking about producing a digital strategy, I mean, there's different ways of approaching that. Obviously, they can write one themselves, or they can get some help in when they feel like they don't have the internal sort of capability to be able to do that. And there are various places they can go for that kind of advice, I understand. Obviously you've got an interest in this area, but what's the advice? If particularly I think for smaller councils that perhaps don't have that internal sort of capacity or indeed capability to be able to be writing a really good digital strategy. What are the things they ought to be doing, and perhaps some of the things they shouldn't be doing?
Yeah, I think realistically, for me, it's sitting down and talking about the outcomes. So I have a very clear model that people go through, the 5 Ds effectively, that take you through a process. And what I found when I've actually gone in and worked, not just with councils, but with third sector, is kind of the lack of conversations that happen between departments. And it's only really when you have some of those conversations that you can go, okay, as a department, we have one very clear outcome that we want to achieve. And if each department can, even if it's just on a scrap of paper, just have one very clear outcome, then IT can look at that and go, okay, we need to write something that delivers those single outcomes. Yep. And that might be themselves or a third party, but the strategy is relatively easy to write when the other bit of work has been done. Mm-hmm. If I can go into accounts and say, okay, give me your social care strategy or departmental plan, your housing strategy, I can sit there very quickly and go, right, here's a list of things you want to achieve, your main outcomes, here's where you are today, this is the gap or the bridge that gets you from one to the other. It's not, I'm going to say, it's not a £400,000 piece of work, Dave. to go in and do that. It can be quite small. And I think people have in their heads that like kind of a strategy going to third party is maybe a 50 grand piece of work or something. It doesn't need to be 60 pages or a 70 page PowerPoint. It can be one page that just says, housing wants to achieve this, here's the gaps. We don't actually know what the solutions are yet.
No.
We will find them.
Yes,
but this year we know, based on what they're saying, we might have a list of prerequisites where we just need to sort some of the network out, we need to sort some infrastructure out, and we won't do anything until we've got that in place, because that sets us up for next year. Yeah. So Durham Cathedral, who I've been working with, their strategy is blank in years 2 and 3.
Right. Yeah.
And got away with that one. So yeah, I've written them a blank strategy. But year 1, the move from where they were to where they are today is massive. There's loads of projects. There's about 7 new bits of software. There's 365. There's hardware replacements. There's infrastructure replacements. And it's kind of like, okay, let's just get that in. That's year 1. We'll get that done. We all had an outcome that they worked to when they were talking to suppliers. So fundraising was, we want to increase fundraising by 10% year on year. So the conversation was, how does your system help us get from where we are today to that figure? And very different conversations. They've come up with some really good solutions. I've not picked or chosen any of them. But then they've got that to get in and get embedded, start using. And then year 2 will be, okay, so we've done the 10%. What's your big outcome for next year? We'll write down the list of problems that are stopping them from achieving it. We'll write down some solutions. And again, we'll look at what that might be. And that's where the ecosystem bit comes in, because they've bought, let's say they bought a new CRM. It's a charity CRM, but it has a gift aid module. It integrates to Zero Finance. It works with Just Giving, Virgin Money, and all the other bits. That will be kind of the year 2 element of it, but we're not there yet.
No.
So let's not worry about writing 3 years worth of stuff when we don't really know what year 2 will look like, and we don't know if they'll be fully reopened next year.
No, indeed.
We don't know whether we'll have another lockdown. We're hoping we'll never have another lockdown, but we don't know that. So,
no. So it's kind of taking an agile approach to strategizing, really.
Yeah, a little bit, because I think I mean I've talked about, you can write a 5-year one if you have a very fixed kind of place of where you want to go, where your business wants to go, or your organization wants to go. And we know how long some of these projects can take. So 5-year one might make sense in some places, but that doesn't mean after 12 months, you don't pick it out the drawer and go, right, are the next 4 years still the right route? Or do we need to tweak stuff a little bit or move things around and come back to it? Or has someone come up with a technology we've not even thought of that changes the game? Because in 5 years, something will happen that's very, very different. So I think you can be quite agile, and I think you can get away with a relatively short document that is a live document, as opposed to 5-year strategy published on the internet. We'll come back to it in 6 years when we realize that we haven't updated it yet, and we'll rewrite it and we'll do a big tender for 50 grand.
Yes.
And there's a lot more to it than that. It's a bit more intricate.
I think you're probably right, and I think my view on that on the strategy question has always been, it depends, and because so much depends on the context of an organisation, where it's at, sort of as a whole organisation, but also the individuals within that organisation and what it is that they need to get the thing done. And sometimes that is a bit of paper that says, here's the digital strategy. Sometimes that's absolutely not what they need, just because it just doesn't suit. It might be a structural thing that actually sticking the word digital on something is profoundly unhelpful for various reasons. And so you have to sort of think all that through. I think the other bit for me, and this ties in with, I know that you sort of use the phrase digital confidence quite a lot in stuff that you talk about, and I was wondering, to what extent that idea of digital confidence, at what level does a council or another organisation need to have that level of digital confidence, and how much of that do they actually need? Do they need to understand? Does your chief exec need to understand the intricacies of the different versions of cloud, or is there some bigger picture that they need to be understanding?
Yeah. So for me, absolutely not. They don't. They need to know what cloud is. They don't need to know IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, whatever. That's irrelevant to most people. But for me, it's about, if I write a digital strategy for a chief exec reads it and goes, yeah, that looks fine, off we go, then you're not going to get any traction with that strategy within the organization. The chief exec has to be able to look at it and go, okay, how does this help my ambition to do this? How does this get us here? What does this mean? And I think coming back to how it's structured, if you're kind of going through the plan and he can see his own, or she can see their own corporate plan within that document, it says we want to make this council better, it's a much easier conversation. I've been plenty of places where the strategy has been approved and either the senior management, chief exec haven't read it, have read it but haven't understood it, but also haven't wanted to put their hand up and gone, I haven't understood it, because the person next to them hasn't said that. And that's kind of part of the confidence, is actually being able to put your hand up and going, don't have a clue what this says. And it's boring because it's IT and it's technical and you've used all these acronyms. It's like, let's cut all that out. But if I took it to the head of social care and said, you're in social care, you need to cut your budget by 10%, you need to place this many more kids, you need to do this, here's a few bits that we think are going to help you. And it might be around better data or being able to visualize it real time. It might be new systems. It might be some online stuff. There's various ways. Then hopefully they can look at that and go, okay, I don't need to know how an API works, but actually what you're saying here makes sense. And I can approve that based on that. And that's where the digital confidence bit comes in, is about how do you know what you're approving if you don't understand any of it?
Yes.
So some of that again comes from have those conversations with people. What are the hang-ups in customer services? What takes them too long? What are they having to do manually? Go and spend some time Googling. There's nothing wrong with Googling stuff. If you don't get cloud, Google it. Just go on Wikipedia. It will give you a rough idea of what cloud is. There's plenty of sites, plenty of videos, and just have a little bit of kind of sense about it, because let's face it, everyone is using digital in the council, in the organization. You have to understand a little bit about not how it hangs together or works, but more what it can do for you, how it can make. I talk about efficiency. I don't really talk about effectiveness because I think you can cover one with the other, but how can tools make me more efficient as a council at what I do? How can it make me better at what I do? If you understand that, that's enough. The technical bits, that's for us guys and people like us who get kicks from talking about stuff like that. No one else wants to, but it's more, what can it do for your business? What can it do for your organization? If you understand that, that's kind of enough to be able to ask the probing questions that you need to.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, I remember in the early days at Croydon, Neil and I got, who did we get? It was Tom Loosemore, who was one of the founding guys from GDS, and we got Catherine Howe in as well, who at the time I think was at Cancer Research, but now she's interim chief exec at Adrian Worthing, I think, at the moment. So, which is great. See somebody like of the digital mindset in a chief exec role. I mean, it's one of the few, I think. And we got those two in to talk to like the senior team about this stuff. And, there's always something, isn't there, about bringing in a third party that's not, it's not Neil and Dave banging on about this stuff again. Actually, there's some different faces here, but saying broadly similar things. But also, I think it was the way in which those two really managed to get over to everybody that this isn't about laptops and printers. It really isn't about that nuts and bolts stuff, and for whatever reason, when Neil and I were saying that, it wasn't quite getting across, but getting these two other folk in to say, no, it's about how the whole organization operates and how it thinks about itself, and, and how it, and the relationship that it has with the people that it works on behalf of, the residents and the businesses in the local area, and what that relationship looks like, and what the expectations are from both sides, and all of that kind of thing. And and for a moment, you could just sort of see scales dropping from people's eyes about it all, and it's a great thing, isn't it, when that does happen? But unfortunately, Catherine and Tom have got jobs, and they're not available to just go around all of 350 odd local councils.
Just do a roadshow, yeah.
Exactly, to tell them what people should be thinking. So I think sort of scaling that stuff up is quite difficult. Have you seen any other really good examples in councils of where that confidence building, other than those that you've been directly involved in yourself, obviously, but
yeah, not hugely, to be honest.
No.
I still see constant. I mean, obviously, we read all the stories on UK Authority, the MJ, and everything, and you kind of read them, and you can see straight away as soon as you read it, you kind of go, I don't think they've understood what the outcome is they're trying to achieve at the end of this. There are a few, and you've mentioned having a chief exec that understands digital. That's count on one hand, isn't it? Really, across most organisations. It's not the thing. We're almost seen as a side part to everything else that's going on. We've got all these important departments that do all the work, and then there's IT over here who are just messing around with, well, we don't even know what they're messing around with. They're just doing stuff, and they turn up with a set of post-it notes every so often and tell us we have to do it differently. West Lindsey, I work with at the moment, they're very good in the fact that they brought me in initially just to work with their senior team.
Right.
And it was just to sit down and go, effectively, you've put a new team in place. Some of them have never managed IT before. Just talk to them. So they would send me through some papers, some business cases. What do you think about this? What questions do I need to ask? Where are we going with this? And we just have a conversation through it for now. And that was almost enough for them to start building that confidence to challenge a few bits. I think there's pockets of it everywhere, and there's people who think they understand it and various other bits, but I still don't see anywhere, or I don't think I've seen anything yet, where there's a CIO genuinely in a CIO role at the top table in a council. And until that happens, I think it's always going to be seen as secondary to a lot of the other stuff. But until someone really steps up and says, actually, someone needs to almost not lead the organisation, but lead the way a little bit with where everyone's at and how they're thinking, then it's always going to be a bit of a bit part to everything else that's going on.
Yes.
And I know there's lots of people with CIO as a job title, but none of them report to the chief exec directly. Or someone will correct us in the comments or something, but
no doubt
there's very, very few who actually do. There's lots of heads of IT, but yeah, to actually have that seat at the table and be involved in the top level conversations, I think is quite rare. And I think that's almost not seeing digital for what it is, or not seeing IT for what it is, or again, thinking we don't want them involved or they'll be difficult. I remember a huge project at Peterborough where we brought all of adult social care back from the NHS to the council. I found out about the project by mistake.
Yeah.
I was walking down the street chatting to someone, and they said, oh, well, this will all be different when adult social care is back. I sat there and went, you what? And they went, oh yeah, we're bringing like 170 staff back over. And it's like, right, okay, someone wanted to talk to me about this. And I found the project manager and said, what's going on? And they went, oh, well, we knew you'd be difficult. It's like, well, don't you engage with us first then?
Yeah.
We're not difficult because we're trying to make it difficult. It's difficult because it's difficult.
Absolutely. I suppose the other bit before we move on is that I suppose that the other side to that is that you and I both know, though, that quite a lot of people who work in IT, often in quite senior positions, and who probably now are sort of rebranding themselves as digital as well, are actually arseholes. And so, they are really difficult. And that's why they don't get spoken to. And I think one of the things about digital confidence, I think particularly for the non-technical leadership in an organization, is actually being able to sniff out bullshit, basically, because quite a lot of folk are basically just being fed fibs a lot of the time about this. I mean, one of my favorites is also, I mean, this isn't particularly digital transformational, but the stuff around disaster recovery and business continuity and stuff like that, most of it is just an absolute pack of lies. I mean, I remember I was at one district council, and I think their business continuity plan said something like that: in the event of total wipeout, their Revs and Ben's IT will be back up and running within 48 hours. And I just had to say, no, it will not. Whoever wrote this was lying to you. This is going to take months, let alone days.
It's one of my favorite things on LinkedIn, Dave, is seeing someone with a job title, digital transformation expert or something, and then you click on their profile and they sell printers. And it's just like, mate, stop that, please.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so there's something, isn't there, about I sort of referred to it in a couple of conversations I've had recently, is about understanding technology enough, and it's just having that enough to know that when somebody says something, you're like, that doesn't smell quite right.
And that's funny. I was chatting to one of my clients the other day, and I said to her, what are the two best things? I didn't really say what are the two best things. I said, what are the best things about working with me? Thinking about some marketing material that's coming off the back of it. And she started with the retainer model, and we went through that. And then she kind of went, the other thing is probably how blunt you are and how much bullshit you sniff out. And it's kind of like, you need to almost sell yourself as no bullshit IT. And it's like, because it's not just sniffing out, but if someone puts a business case in front of me, I'll look at it and just go, no, that's shit. And I've been in so many places where they kind of go, oh, yeah, well, yeah, we'll do that. And suddenly you've invested 50 grand in something that's absolutely pointless.
Yes.
And because the others don't have the understanding. And I think there's an element of, they talk a lot about IT has to understand the business, but the business has to start to understand IT a little bit more as well. I think there's a meeting point in the middle of the two parties. It can't just be, oh, IT don't understand the business. They don't in a lot of ways, but they can. But no one understands IT. And like you said, it's not understanding how it all works, but just have a basic knowledge that if the entire estate goes down, it's 2 months before it comes back. There's a lot of work. I had a guy at Peterborough randomly stuck a screwdriver, into our UPS, which for anyone who doesn't know is the U is uninterruptible. Well, if you stick a screwdriver in it, it interrupts pretty quickly. And that took the estate down for 2 days. Yeah, they're not little things that you can just go, oh, turn it off and on again and it's back. You're kind of rebuilding half a network.
Yeah,
when you get
absolutely.
To and
then I think let's finish this up. I think the other bit for me though is it's like it's fine not to be a complete expert in technology and digital and things, but that doesn't, I think, give like leaders a get out of jail free card in terms of like owning it. So again, I've had conversations in the past with folks, like chief executives sometimes, and they say, oh well, we can't get this going because IT, what can you do? And it's like, well, you can do quite a lot actually.
You can do quite a lot. Step in and give them a boot, and that's exactly. Where
sort it out.
Some of the work I do, it's kind of that mentor role of just being at the end of a phone for them to phone me up and go, is this right? And it's like, no, it's not, it's utter garbage. Send it back to them. It's like, go back to your IT. But similarly, it's a bit of a bad example, but I took Ben, who used to work with me at Peterborough when he first started, I took him to a conference in London, a local government IT conference. And before we went in, I joked and said, count the bald heads and the grey hair when we get in. And he sat down, he just went, it's like 80% of the room. I was like, yeah, because that's where a lot of this is. And it's not necessarily just saying that old and out of touch, but what's more worrying is they're just set in their ways. They've been doing it a single way for a long time, and they will continue doing it that way until they retire because they're very comfortable with it. And then these smart asses like me and you come along and go, no, that's wrong. You dig it up and start again, and we'll do it a different way. There's very, very clearly different ways of achieving the same result, which isn't necessarily liked. So it's also very hard to market myself into organizations because I do digital confidence, I do strategy. You're automatically sent to the IT department, and you're kind of like going, it's not them I want to talk to, it's you as the chief exec or you as the section 151 resources director, finance director. They're the people that actually need to get to grips with some of this stuff before we even go anywhere near IT.
Yeah, no, completely agree. So one of the things that, I've seen some of the videos of you on some very, very big stages indeed in the past, not just at sort of dancing clubs, but also at tech conferences, talking about the smart city stuff that you were doing in Peterborough. And I must admit that, I don't know, I'm conflicted about smart cities. I think I completely buy into the idea of it. seems really, it seems eminently sensible that, that we can use, sensors and AI to process all this data to be able to figure out what it is that we should be doing. But all the examples of it I've seen, I think, up till this point, I've just kind of found a little bit underwhelming. And whether it's just that it's fallen victim to kind of pilot-itis maybe a bit, or it's just lacking that killer app or whatever, I'm not sure. But what's your take on the state of smart cities in 2021?
Yeah, I'm going to kind of repeat myself a little bit, and what I see from whenever I read these is they don't always understand what the outcome is they're trying to achieve. And some of that comes down to how the technology is sold by the marketing department or the sales guys, but also the councils just going, almost, this sounds good, we'll do a 6-month pilot. And the examples I always come back to, for me, the ones I really hate are the smart parking apps. And it's not necessarily the apps themselves, it's how they're sold. So they're selling them about lowered emissions, improving people's health, doing all this. And you kind of go, okay, that's fine. But you've just done a 6-month pilot. That's not improved anyone's health. Having 1,000 cars out of 10,000 cars come into your city and park a minute quicker hasn't improved anyone's health. So that's kind of like a 3 to 5 year project that you need to have in place. And then you need to monitor that for the next 15 years, because it's probably not my health that you're improving, it's my kids' health and the next generation coming through. And that's where I think a lot of them are falling down, is they're going, big ambition, we want to make people healthier, but we're only doing a pilot and we're not going to run it for very long. And at no point are we working with the NHS to actually look at whether the people coming through the front door have got different symptoms or are improving or anything. And that's where you can flip back. And I mentioned just before we came on, there's a good example. I think it was North Yorkshire I read the other day, who basically came up and did the smart parking and said, we want people to be able to park quicker, but we also want them to stay in town longer. So they're not running back to their car to top it up or put a new ticket on. There's a sensor in the parking space that knows when you parked, it knows when you left. You get billed by the minute, I think it was, for exactly how long you stayed. But that means if you want another coffee in town, you have another coffee. So the outcome there was about people spending more money in the city, sort of thing. You're going, okay, I'm happy with that, because that makes sense. If they'd gone down the route of, oh, we're going to improve air quality and we're going to do all this, you can then I'm in the bullshit mode, and it's like, you're not though, are you? And I think that's the big issue for me is they don't necessarily always understand the outcome. And technically every project you do should be smart, because it's about improving the lives of the residents and citizens within your city. And again, therefore, every city is different. Every city has different problems. And the one thing that I don't think you can do, I read a lot about building smart cities from the ground. So in China and places in the Middle East, they're going, we'll build a brand new city. They're kind of tech cities. They're just cities filled with sensors. Until you put the people in, you don't know what any of the problems are. And it's the problems that you're trying to fix. If you're doing a project that's not fixing a problem, then don't do the project, because it's pointless. So in a lot of the cases, you look at the smart parking and what they're doing, and actually the answer isn't an app. The answer is build a multi-story car park, or have a park and ride,
or stop driving cars.
Or stop driving cars.
Yeah.
And if you've got a park and ride, people aren't coming into the city in the first place. And I think people aren't really thinking through it. The automatic thing is link smart with tech and apps and sensors. And actually, Peterborough won World's Smartest City in 2015, and it was nothing to do with anything I was doing. I still claim it, it's on my CV.
Naturally.
But genuinely, it was nothing to do with what I was doing. There's a group of girls who I will name: Charlotte, Emma, Poppy, Ina, and I'm going to miss someone, but they'll pick me up on it later. Cecile, they were doing their circular economy work. And that was all about taking waste from one place and reusing it. And obviously within that, we built some platforms for them to share this information. So this is why I can still claim it. But actually, when the awards were kind of looked at, I think we were the only one that stood out as doing a lot of work that was non-techie, non-sensory. It was Peterborough had a big coffee company, Master Roast Coffee. Obviously, they had thousands of Hessian sacks at the end of the week that'd been cut open. They set a company up next to it that took those Hessian sacks, put a liner in them, and made them a bag for life.
Right. Yeah.
And so suddenly 1,000 bags weren't going to landfill. And it was thinking differently and thinking about things like that. That for me, that's the best example of a smart city. And even little things like Marmite is a waste extract from the brewing industry.
Yes.
Sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's how we doing all this stuff. There's an element that says, okay, but we need some IT, we need some technology to bring people together and give them somewhere to talk. And even if you run a factory and your factory runs 9 till 5, do you have tools that other small businesses could use 5 till midnight or something that would help them and ultimately help you and do other stuff? And it's about that kind of thing rather than we'll put some air quality sensors out. Lots of councils are going, oh, we've got air quality sensors. You're like, brilliant. What if it's really bad? What if your air quality is hideously bad and you've just published it all as open data? What are you actually going to do?
Yeah.
You've got to fix it. And like I say, it's fine having the information, but knowing the outcome you're trying to achieve in a lot of cases can be a 20-year thing that you need to be looking at. And all too often it's a 6-month pilot or a 2-year pilot.
Yeah.
And it's just not long enough. And that's where, for me, it all falls down.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting, isn't it? I mean, there's a couple of bits in there, actually, I think. I mean, one is, I did a video with Ben Proctor from Data Orchard a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things he was talking about in terms of, the struggles that organisations, including councils, have with making better use of like business intelligence and data and that kind of stuff is that, well, it's one thing to collect the data and to share the data and to put it in pretty graphs and stuff, but you've actually got to do something on got to make decisions based on that data. And like you were saying with the air quality thing, whether it's good or it's bad, you've got it. Now what? And so it's a bit, so that feels like it's the wrong way round. And then maybe the other bit about it that's the wrong way round, which is where the sort of the issue with pilots and stuff come in, is that people are sort of thinking, and there's a thing here, isn't there, about the way that these things are funded, I suspect, is what drives all of this. Yeah. So in other words, there's some funding available to do something with smart cities or Internet of Things or something like that. And you think, well, that's completely the wrong way to look at it. Because, we'll sit in a room and we'd say, right, we need to do something with smart cities or where can we put some sensors? And everyone sort of goes, well, I don't know, so we'll bung some in the roads, we'll bung some in some wheelie bins and see what happens. But then, again, sometimes start from the problem, and then apply the technology
separate.
Yes,
again, to all the departments. So again, problem solving. Go into social care and go, what is your biggest 3 problems you've got in social care? And they probably won't turn around and go air quality. It'll be something else. And you're going, okay, let's go and find smart solutions that fix these problems. And I agree 100% on the funding side of it. I think there's A, it's short-sighted, and B, they almost get too excited about the wrong stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I know they funded like £10 million autonomous vehicles in Milton Keynes sort of 5 or 6 years ago. I've seen
that does sound like the most depressing thing in the world, doesn't it?
How to go around a roundabout. Do you know what I mean? I've seen nothing come out of that ever.
Yeah,
kind of no follow-up or anything. And there's things like that money would have been better spent going, here's £10 million, we're going to pump it into some adult social care solutions, because that's actually what councils are crying out for. That's where their budgets are being hit. Adult services, children's services, let's find solutions that solve that and help that. And that might be coming all the way back to where people live, their homes, the quality of the homes. Can they afford to have the heating on, the boilers? Are they trying to do the homework with 4 brothers in a 2-bed house, and therefore actually their attainment rates are dropping? And everything is about just thinking very differently about why you've got some of these problems and therefore what you can do. And again, the homework one, I use that as an example once of 2 kids in exactly the same kind of level of brightness, but one going home to his fairly wealthy parents in a nice suburban house with no brothers and sisters doing homework is very different to one going back to a 2-bed end of terrace with 3 brothers in quite dark and a bit damp.
Yeah.
And if their attainment rates are dropping because of the environment, then it's not on the kid. It's almost like the solution is that you keep school open and they do the homework at school, where it's a nice environment. And we've studied that lessons need to be 40 minutes long, and the amount of blue in the lights needs to be 40%, and all that stuff. And it's like, create the right environment for these people, and you're then helping them long term, not here's an app. How many apps do you think there are, Dave, in the council world?
Oh, well, just for parking alone, I know that I've got about 15 on my phone. So yeah.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? It's like every solution is always, we'll build an app.
Yeah.
And you keep seeing it, you're like, don't need an app. Don't need an app for that. You're going to be downloaded by 300 people max. And that'll be week 1. And in week 2, it'll be 200. And in week 3, it'll be 100. Stop building apps. Genuinely, please. Everyone out there, stop building apps.
Stop building apps. I think that's probably a pretty good rule to live by, isn't it? And I think that's quite interesting. I mean, and just to sort of summarize that, I think what's interesting, and this wasn't by design in any way, but actually the answers to the 2 things we've been talking about, whether it's sort of digital strategy and then also the smart cities stuff, is actually, always focus on outcomes, not on technology for technology's sake. But also fundamentally, and I think you made that point quite strongly just now, actually, is that, but in both senses, it's about humans, not computers at the end of the day. And and I think that a lot of the talk, sometimes it gets lost, doesn't it? Like the focus on things like meeting user needs and all of that kind of stuff. I think sometimes that can, we almost can't help ourselves in our industry to sort of become quite sort of technocratic about these things. But actually, because the focus on user needs really is about, I think, remembering that there's a human being at the center of this process, with all the messiness that brings to it. Yeah.
Am I making that person's life better by what I'm doing?
Yeah.
It's fundamentally in a lot of the stuff we do. And like, again, you go to a presentation, and if it's the tech company standing up, then my God, half the room are asleep, because it's about how you connect the data and you're doing this stuff. And it's like, just stand up and go, we're doing this project to help this small group of people, because in this city, this is the problem. Yeah. And this is the outcome we're hoping to achieve. And be honest, it might take 10 years to get there. It genuinely might. It might take longer, but have some idea about that. And funny, Dave, I know we'll run out of time at some point without me saying outcome again. But even when you're buying software or buying technology, buy it from an outcome that you want to achieve from it, not a list of requirements. It does my head in every time I see a tender go out with, it must connect to Windows 10 and it must work on this. It's like, it must make me better at what I do. It must cut processing time. It must make it easier for the resident. It must make this, and then go out and see how many can answer those questions.
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right. Brilliant stuff. Okay, thanks so much, Richard. So if people want to find you and get in touch to discuss your views and maybe order some sportswear, how do they do that?
Yes, so my website is Syncity. Sadly, I've had to put a hyphen in the middle of it because I didn't realise someone in America had already bought the .co.uk, but it is www.sin-city.co.uk. And I'm on LinkedIn, Richard Godfrey, Instagram, Facebook. I'm everywhere pretty much. Selling my services to the highest bidder.
You're on all the channels.
I'm on all the channels. You have to be these days.
Nice one. And we can't let you go actually without pimping your podcast as well, which you've just started doing. Where do people find that, and what's that all about?
Yeah, so that is it's on all the major channels, Dave. Spotify, Apple, Google, and a lot I'd never even heard of before. Breaker and some other ones that come up on the list. And so the podcast is Digital Confidence and Decision Making. And ultimately, series 1 is me kind of an audio book at the moment. So I wrote the book Be the Five last year, published it in October. That is around digital confidence, takes you through a process, methodology. And what I've done is done series 1 of the podcast, basically narrating the book, but then adding to it. So where I've given an example in the book, I'll then expand on that slightly, or I even talk about how the book was written and the process that I went through to write a book and how it came to be kind of what it is and published. So hopefully it's quite interesting. I know it's something that some people might want to listen to just before they drift off. They might never make it to the end of the episode, but listen to it again because it adds to the stats.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's there. And obviously the book is available on Amazon called Be the Five by me as well.
Fantastic. Nice one. Good stuff. And thanks ever so much again for your time. And we should do this again.
We will do, Dave. Enjoyed it very much.
All right then, mate. Cheers.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Cheers, mate. Bye.